Welcome to Dragoon Springs Station, part of the Butterfield Overland mail route. We're here in, kind of south central, southeast Arizona, maybe 80 miles outside of Tucson at the Dragoon Mountains. And we're here at the trailhead. Looks to be about 200 yards to get up to the actual station. And why is it called Dragoon Springs? Well, let me flip this. There we got the Dragoon Mountains. So thus Dragoon Springs Station. Okay, let's walk up here and see what's here. This is going to be a three-part story. The first part is I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the Dragoon Spring stage stop, which was part of the Butterfield Overland stage route. And I'm going to do a video from the stage stop over at Fort Bowie, which will have much more information about the Butterfield route. And I'll leave a link to that for you. Second part is going to be about the tragedy that took place at the stage stop. And the third part will be about the Confederate graves and how they ended up being at the stage stop. So here we go, a little bit about the station. The San Antonio and San Diego mail line began service across Arizona to the Pacific coast in July 1857. Also, Congress passed the Overland Mail Bill in 1857, and this was to provide mail service twice a week from San Francisco to St. Louis. Along this 2,700-mile route, the station was to be one of 200, and construction began in August of 1858. The San Antonio line of the Butterfield Overland stage route stopped here near Dragoon Springs. The stop is named in reference to the spring nearby in the Dragoon Mountains. The mountains themselves are named for the 3rd U.S. Cavalry Dragoons that patrolled the area. This mail service was commonly known as the jackass mail because mules were used to pull the coaches. The station was built in August and early September 1858 by the Butterfield's Overland Mail Company to house employees and livestock. The construction of the station was supervised by Butterfield Division Superintendent William Buckley of Watertown, New York. Dragoon Spring Station was considered a swing station. These stations were used for changing horses or mules. A home station would include a station master, a cook, and maintenance men. This stage stop had great impact on the economy of the southwest area, bringing many new settlers and employing a large number of people. Mail service to Dragoon Springs ended in 1861. At this time, the Civil War began. There was an increased Indian uprisings in the area, and the faster Pony Express service started in 1860. Next, I want to talk about the tragedy that happened at Dragoon Springs Station. And this is a report from the Washington Union, a newspaper in Washington, D.C. that was printed on Friday, January 28, 1859. And it basically talks all about the tragedy in the station. And here's what it has to say. The escape of Silas St. John. In yesterday's Union, we spoke at length of the necessity for the organization of Arizona. The story told below is a strong commentary upon our remarks. Mr. St. John, the main hero of this escape, is now in this city, and the great courage he displayed under the horrible circumstances in which he was placed entitles him to such much sympathy. It is understood that Mr. St. John brings letters of commendation from distinguished sources to many prominent men in Congress, should the territorial bill for Arizona become a law and applicable which we trust will be successful, will be made for him for a subordinate appointment in the territory where he has been, by the loss of his arm, disabled for life. The escape of Silas St. John. Mr. Silas St. John, the only survivor of the party in charge of the United States Mail Station at Dragoon Springs, Arizona, in September last has reached this city from San Francisco by the sea passage and is on his way to Washington with letters commending him to the attention of the government. He called at the office of the Century on Thursday last and gave us the following particulars of the murder of his associates and of his own remarkable escape and sufferings. He wore an overcoat of the national blue, one sleeve of which hung loose and armless at his side. He was born in the city of New York and is now only 24 years of age, but his features are already strongly marked by the resolution that is acquired by exposure to the toil and accidents of pioneer life. Dragoon Springs in the Gadsden Purchase, 83 miles east of Tucson and 65 miles from Fort Buchanan. The corral or station is a rectangular enclosure 25 by 35 feet, protected by a stone wall 2.5 feet thick at its base and 8 feet high. 1/3 of the space is occupied by the storehouses and the sleeping apartment of the station manager. The mules are kept in the other part, ready for change on the arrival of the mail. A heavy wooden gate defends the entrance. 3 Mexicans named Guadalupe, Bonifacio, and Pablo, and 3 Americans constituted Mr. St. John's guard at the time of the attack. On the night of the 8th of September, one of the Mexicans took his turn on the watch, while the other 2 were supposed to be sleeping outside the corral. James Burr, formerly of Watertown, New York, also slept on the outside on a hillock. The other Americans, Preston Cunningham of California and James Lang of Kentucky, were sleeping in the storeroom, which communicated by a door with Mr. St. John's apartment. The first notice that Mr. St. John had any unusual movement was the passage of the 2 Mexicans from the outside into the storeroom, and immediately after he heard blows struck. He called to Burr to arouse him outside, but at that instant that poor fellow was killed by the 3rd Mexican. The 2 others now rushed into St. John's apartment. Guadalupe made a stroke at him with a carpenter's axe, which cut him severely in the hip. Bonifacio struck at him with a chopping axe, and he received the blow on his left arm, which was instantly disabled. He was fortunate enough to knock him down with his fists before he could swing a second time. Then he retreated, still warding off blows, to the head of his mattress for his gun, when the 2 assailants backed out, but hearing the gun fall, they judged that St. John was unable to use it, and returned to the assault, accompanied by the boy who had killed Burr. St. John met them with a revolver and fired, when they all fled. The shot struck Pablo, and his bones were found some days after picked by the wolves. St. John took up a position where he could see around the corral, and remained there until daylight, when he fell over from the loss of blood. His left arm was broken and cut through, excepting only the flesh which covered the main artery. He was alone all the next day, which was Thursday. Cunningham died 24 hours after he received his wound. Lane staggered about, hardly sensible, his brain oozing from the skull. They attempted to drink some water which the Mexicans had placed there in buckets, but it caused vomiting immediately, and St. John poured it on the ground, fearing that excessive weakness from the loss of blood might tempt him to try it again. Lang lived 6 days after he received his wound. The mules were suffering for food and water, and several had broken loose. St. John crept a distance of 15 feet and opened the gate to let them out, and returned to his watching place. The exertion cost him 2 hours of time on account of his extreme weakness. He could not sleep at night for the wolves, which came around and poked their noses through the gate bars, howling for attention, and during the day crows and buzzards perched on the walls, attracted by the smell of the dead bodies. St. John had succeeded in writing a statement of the murder in a small book for the information of the San Antonio and San Diego mail party that was due at the station on Monday. Fortunately, it arrived on Sunday morning. The first person who approached him was a personal friend, Mr. George Caldwell of California, and his servant. They immediately went in pursuit of water. Lieutenant Mowry, delegate to Washington from Arizona, and Colonel Leach, the superintendent of the El Paso wagon road, made every exertion for Mr. St. John's relief. A man was left with him while the mail pushed on to the next station, from which 2 men were sent with supplies. An express was sent to Dr. Irwin of Fort Buchanan. The doctor was almost at 50 miles distance. On being notified, he rode day and night 115 miles and reached Dragoon Springs early on the morning of the 17th. St. John had laid 9 days in his blood. His arm was amputated, with no hope, however, by the doctor, that his life would be saved. The maggots had consumed the mortified flesh and prevented the more rapid spread of putrefaction. 6 days after the amputation, St. John was taken to Fort Buchanan, where he remained till November 6. Mr. St. John desires particularly to return his grateful thanks to Lieutenant Mowry, Colonel Leach, Dr. Irwin, and Mr. Caldwell for their attention and kindness. Since writing the above, Colonel Leach has called and confirmed its truth. He gives a few additional particulars. Burr's head was crushed by a heavy blow with a stone hammer as he lay doubled up on the side, and to all appearance he had not moved a muscle. St. John's arm was separated at the shoulder from the socket. So that's the story of the tragedy that occurred at the station on September 8th, 1858. The next point of interest is something that you might be surprised to find in Arizona, that being the graves of 3 Confederate soldiers. On May 5, 1862, a Confederate foraging party rounding up cattle near the abandoned Butterfield Overland mail station battled a group of Apaches. The soldiers were members of Company A, Governor John R. Baylor's Regiment of Arizona Rangers, under the command of Captain Sherrod Hunter. Captain Hunter's command was based at Tucson and engaged in operations against Union forces from California. 4 of Hunter's men were killed, and the Apaches took 25 horses and 30 mules. It is unknown whether any of the Apaches were slain. From the Apache point of view, the Confederate Party represented yet another unwelcome threat to the security of their homeland. The Chahocum band of the Chiricahua Apache, including the famous leader Cochise, were then living in the Dragoon Mountains. Relationships with the United States, already uneasy, became markedly hostile in 1861 after a young U.S. Army officer, Lieutenant Bascom, falsely accused Cochise's group of kidnapping a child from a Sonita Valley ranch. In 1862, the Apaches viewed any soldier, whether Army or Confederate, as enemy invaders. 2 months after the Confederates were killed near Dragoon Springs, the Apaches would do battle with Union forces at Apache Pass in the Chiricahua Mountains. The fallen Confederates of the 1862 skirmish were hastily buried a few yards from the stone walls of the recently abandoned Butterfield Overland mail station. 2 of the graves are marked: Sergeant Samuel Ford and Ricardo, a Hispanic cattle driver. There are no markers on the other 2 burial mounds, but one probably holds the remains of Captain John Donaldson. The 4th burial remains unknown. These soldiers are the only Confederates known to have been killed in battle within the boundaries of modern-day Arizona. I hope you found this video informative, interesting. I know, we're glad we came here. I'll put the GPS coordinates in the description below. We're about 1-2 mile due west of Dragoon, Arizona. The road most passable with most passenger cars. I never even gave it a thought to kick it into four-wheel drive, so that's no problem to get here. And I guess the most surprising thing is when you're in Arizona, you don't expect to find Confederate graveyards, which is what we have here, besides the station. And yeah, it's just interesting. You don't think of the Confederacy, Civil War time in Arizona. Well, as usual, if you liked the video, leave a comment. Let me know what you enjoyed about it. And maybe give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and see more fun stuff. We're out here right now. There is no one else here, and I doubt very many people actually make the trip, but glad we did. And as usual, have yourself a good day. God bless.